HOA down 750K. A good friend of mine about 4 years ago inherited the house of his grandparents. He decided to live there for the time being till he decided what to do with the house. He grew up in it, so he didn't really want to sell it. Not even a week after he moved in, he got a visit from a neighborhood committee. They said they are the 3 board members of the homeowners association of that community and are here so he can sign his membership papers. They were extremely nosy and rude. For example, one tried to get into the garage without so much as asking. When he stopped him and asked him where he wanted to go, he had the audacity to say, "I need to check your garage if everything there is in order. I have a right to do this bi-weekly, and denying me access is an offense that will cost a fine." He then had enough of their audacity and kicked them out of the house. While doing so, one of the board members shoved some papers in his face and told him he needed to sign this right now. He had lived there a week already, and the HOA claimed this had to be signed before he moved in. Once they were gone, he took a look at the papers. They were effing ridiculous and gave the HOA rights that were simply effing surreal. They had, for example, a right to visit your home bi-weekly and check that you do not use the garage for storage. Don't have gasoline or containers in your garage. Same goes for gas. You had to mow your lawn every week. Every week, snow had to be shuffled every 2 hours when it snowed, starting at 5 o'clock in the morning. You could not park more than 1 car on your grounds, except inside a garage, and tons of other BS. A few days later, they came back and asked him why he did not sign the papers yet. They also wanted to check the garage again. This time, he would not even let them in, and told them he would never become a member of their stupid club. To them, that meant war. Within a week, they had sent him fines north of $1,000. Some of them were for denying him access to his home, each worth $250. My friend simply did not take them seriously and used their stupid letters to help fire his grill. Then came the day when they went extremely too far. He came back, and one of the board members had broken into his garage, stood in it, and was writing Notepad. But that wasn't even the worst part. He had 2 wonderful oak trees in the front of the house. They had been planted by his great-grandparents when they were newlyweds and had moved into the house. The HOA was in the process of taking them down. Oh, they had called a professional crew for this. One was already so damaged. Basically, all the twigs were already down. It was just a stump that was left. The other one they had just started with. He effing lost it. He told the tree crew to stop right the EFF now and explained to them that he was the owner and what they did was highly illegal. They had no idea since the board member claimed these trees were in violation of the rules, since supposedly too many leaves went to the neighbor's garden. He had told them that was no legal reason to take them down. But the board member claimed I had given my okay, because the trees were in violation of rules of the HOA. He looked it up later. They actually had a bylaw that if a garden produces more than 140-liter sack of leaves within 2 weeks, the garden owner needs to take down the offending trees within 2 weeks. He told them he would overlook them trespassing if they would be witnesses in court for him. Here comes the revenge part of the story. He proceeded to call the cops and the board members for trespassing and damage to private property. They actually had to use a bolt cutter to get into his garage. He always had it closed with a big bike lock after they tried to get in it twice before. The trial must have been glorious. Not only did they have to repay him for the lock in the tree, which was worth a ton of money, north of 50K if I remember right, plus damages for the second tree. He had a professional tree person look after it, so all the damage healed properly, which alone cost nearly $1,000. But these idiots actually thought the trial would have been unfair and tried to fight it, which probably cost them an additional 10 to 15K in lawyers and court costs. All in all, this trial must have cost them over $120,000. Then he went to civil court and sued them for emotional damage. He told them how much these trees meant to him since his great-grandparents had planted them with seeds from the home country. He really laid it on as thick as he could. Plus, he felt threatened by the HOA and can hardly sleep because he always fears they'll try to get into his house. The court, unsurprisingly, bought it and gave him $500,000, plus the cost for a new state-of-the-art home security system, so he could finally feel safe again in his own home. So, put all together, he cost the HOA nearly $750,000. Heh, they had to file for bankruptcy and get a person to check the books so my friend would get his money. The best is the latest, and oh boy it is. Meanwhile, in the process, the mediator actually found out that these three pricks had been defrauding the HOA for well over 10 years and were giving out as many fines as they possibly could so they could use it to bolster their income. All three had to sell their houses so they could pay out my friend. Now he is one of the most appreciated neighbors in the area, and he constantly gets invited over for grilling and whatnot. You see, most people never wanted the HOA in the first place, but the board member practically forced them to sign the contract, claiming it would not be optional, and if they did not sign before moving in, it would be a $500 fine. Only 6 of the over 50 members actually wanted this HOA, and people think they did it to get part of the action as a reward for spying on their neighbors to find violations. I like to think that one of those grill outs was the neighbors gathering in front of those HOA members as they moved out. Can you imagine? Can you imagine 30 happy neighbors? Eating burgers, grilling hot dogs, and drinking beers. Laughing as those HOA members had to move out of their house that they had to sell to pay this dude. Moral of the story, don't cut down another man's trees. 32 trees equals $2 million. A friend who is a municipal arborist just called to tell me about a guy who cut down 32 big mature trees on his neighbor's NJ property to get a better view of NYC. He hired a guy who hired another guy, cut them down, and left the debris there. The fine per tree is $1,000, so the guy probably thought he was going to just pay a $32,000 fine. But the arborist wrote violations to all three parties, 96 in all, by hand, took him 12 hours, and there's a provision requiring the replanting of like trees of the same size. And it's on an inaccessible by road mountainside. He put the affronted landowner in touch with the only guy who would take on such a job. Or why have to build a road, remove the debris, plant big trees, and water them for 2 years? He quoted $1.5 million. And additional fines total $400,000. I hope whoever this ass is he can't pay, and they lien and sell his property, the value of which he probably figured would be increased so much a $32,000 fine was worth it to cover the cost. We are living in the Jamie Dimon ethos. So fine us, we can afford it. Wrecked Oaks Wreck Neighbors account book. Hi, a friend told me to check this sub out for legal advice. I'm not sure whether this is worth getting a lawyer over, but I am pretty pissed. So I moved into my current house about 2 years ago. It's a beautiful 3-acre property, mostly flat except for about a dozen large trees bordering part of a road that runs alongside my property. I'm not sure what type they are, but they're pretty big. I think they're oaks. I love them. They provide some great shade in the summer during part of the day and are just pretty. My neighbor doesn't like them. He's not really my neighbor since his house is quite a bit down the road, but he's the closest one to me. When I first moved in, he came over and introduced himself and asked if I planned to do anything about the trees. I was confused and told him no. He told me a little bit before I moved in, one of the trees had a branch break off and fall into the road, causing an obstruction that lasted a whole day, according to him. He said the previous owner didn't care and didn't cut down the trees, but he, the neighbor, hoped that I would. I told him I would talk to the previous owner and see about it. I did that, and though it was 2 years ago, as I recall, the owner told me he went out and moved the branch the moment he saw it. We talked a bit more, and I decided not to cut down the trees. Like I said, I like them. Anyways, that's all the backstory that I think matters. So I was away this past week and weekend visiting family for our annual reunion. I come back and honestly almost drove past my own house because I was so used to seeing the line of trees and they weren't there. He cut down all my trees. Oh. I immediately went and asked him, and he said he had them removed due to being a hazard and that it was legal because the city signed off on it. I was livid, but just left and told him to stay off my property. There aren't even stumps, guys. They are completely gone. I asked my other neighbors, one who lives down the road the opposite way and another across the way, what happened. And they said he had a company out there cutting them down all week. One of them asked him about it, and apparently he showed them some document from the city that gave him permission to remove the trees. Is that true? Can he just remove my trees? Should I call a lawyer about this? Should I call the city? I don't even know where to start. It's left the whole area of my property an ugly strip of dirt and loose earth. I know the trees are definitely on my property. The previous owner and real estate agent walked around with me, and I remember them showing me the extent of the property, and it's not like the trees are right up against the road. The trunks were like 15 to 20 feet in from the road, and were probably 15 feet apart. I'm not sure, but they stretched a pretty good amount along the road, and some of the branches definitely hung over the road. What should I do? Edit. So, I've been meticulously checking this for comments. Thank you so much to everyone who has offered advice. I also called the previous owner, who was rather surprised to hear from me, and told him what happened. He was also pissed. He told me those trees had been there since before he bought the house 20-something years ago. And he also told me what kind. He says they were white oaks. But I'm going to go with what some people suggested and hire an arborist to come out. By the way, I should have been more clear. Whoever removed the trees didn't take out all the stumps. I meant like the classic 2-foot stump wasn't there. They were trimmed down to like a few inches, barely noticeable. And there is a lot of loose dirt like they tried digging or something. I'm going to talk to the police tomorrow and see if I can talk to whoever is in charge of these matters with the city. Hopefully they can tell me if they gave permission to my neighbor or not. Thanks, everyone. Quick update. Hi, everyone. This blew up overnight, and I am so thankful for all the advice. This was a busy morning, but I think I'm on the right track. Some of your comments were shocking. Are trees really worth that much? I know my neighbor is a little wealthy since he's told me about a summer house he has in Sun River. Is that okay that I mention the general area of his summer home? But I don't know if he paid for this or what. I went to the police first thing and asked to report trespassing and possible vandalism. The officer took down my story, and I even brought him some photos which he asked to keep. He then told me, and this kind of pissed me off, that unless I had proof of my neighbor cutting these trees down or giving authorization to cut them down, it may turn into my word against my neighbors. He suggested I just pursue this in court myself. Is he right? I don't want to question a police officer, but I want to be sure. While at the police station, I asked who I should talk to specifically with the city about permits and tree removals, and the officer told me to try the Public Works, which matched what a user commented. Thank you. I went home and called them. The lady asked for my street address so she could check it against her records, and I did, and she found nothing. Not a single thing. She said there was nothing regarding my address or property in the last 6 weeks. I noted that and thanked her. Then I called an arborist like many of you suggested and made an appointment for later this week. She, the arborist, also asked that I have some photos of the trees when she comes, which is fine since I have more. Finally, I looked up companies that do landscaping or logging or tree removal, covering all my bases since I really don't know who would handle tree removal anywhere other than a farm. Anyways, after calling a few places, I got one who confirmed that they did the job and told me they were following a city order. That call was after I called the lady at the Public Works for my city, and she told me there was no record of my address. Did my neighbor lie to this company? They didn't ask me for more details, and when I asked who showed them the order, they said they couldn't tell me. WTF? Is that true? I'm going to look up some law offices in my general area and reach out about all of this. Does this fall under a specific type of law office? Should I hire a specific lawyer? Sorry, I'm really out of my league here. I'll let you all know what happens, though. Thank you again for this great advice and support. Side note, I went through the comments of this thread, and a lot of users are theorizing that the neighbor probably created a fake legal document from the city and used it to lie to the tree company and all of the neighbors. Then later, OP posted an incredible update. Hello, legal advice community. I have not forgotten about you, who helped me set on the path to justice. I'll get right to it. I can't speak to all the details, and I'm sorry about not continuing to update. After everything got underway, I figured it would be best not to. To keep it short, my lawyer and I, who then spoke to the neighbors down and across the street, the ones who witnessed my trees getting cut down, who stated they saw the neighbor and the company cutting down the trees, and then finally they spoke to the neighbor. I don't know much beyond that with a criminal investigation. What happened with the whole city document or the company, and why that is will be explained below. I hauled his but into court. Well, first, the arborist came, as did the surveyor. The trees were on my property, and they were white oaks. The arborist gave me an estimate of having 15 mature white oaks brought and replanted on my property, which was just shy of $650,000. Though he did say some trees would die, and that would drive the cost up. I also had my property appraised for the difference before and after losing my trees. It then became a question of whether I wanted to pursue my lost trees and see how much their lumber was worth, or sue for the replacement costs and loss of property value. Basically, do I want the trees back, or do I want the cost of the ones I lost? Apparently, you can't have both. Well, guys, I picked the trees. The actual court stuff started a lot sooner than I thought. We filed, a few weeks passed, and a few days before our day in court, His lawyer reached out with a settlement offer. Apparently, he was wealthier than I thought. We accept it, and while I can't speak to the details of it yet, I'm getting the trees back. It's going to take a long time, apparently several months, possibly all the way until September, since this process didn't start until just this week due to the holidays. But I will have all 12 trees back on my property at no cost to me. Ha ha ha, my neighbor has also put his house up for sale, and I haven't seen him for quite some time now. Oh well, there's a bit more to the settlement, but I don't feel comfortable speaking to that. Hopefully that's understandable. I remember some of the comments about whether the trees were a hazard to the road based on how far they were from the road. I ended up having to check with the county, not the city, and they sent someone out to measure and mark the boundaries. My trees were at least 5 feet beyond it, so outside the boundary. Not even close. Just thought I'd add that in. Thanks for watching Webhouse Stories. And hit the like and subscribe button, please.